What if I told you your bad habits aren't accidents? What if they're not even problems? They're clues, signals from the deepest part of your mind. You've been fighting them, punishing yourself for them, even hating yourself because of them. But Carl Jung would tell you you've been looking at it all wrong. Think about this. Every time you grab your phone when you're anxious, every time you stay up late even though you're exhausted, every time you eat when you're not hungry, it's not weakness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's your unconscious speaking in a language you never learned to read. Today, we're going to decode that language. We're going to step into Jung's world and discover why your habits are not your enemy, they're your messengers. And by the end of this video, you'll never see them the same way again. Most of us believe the solution to bad habits is simple. Try harder, be more disciplined, set alarms, delete apps, throw away the cigarettes, swear to never touch the junk food again. And maybe for a day or a week, it works. But then, in your weakest moment late at night, stressed, lonely, bored, the habit returns. And it doesn't just return quietly. It comes back stronger, almost laughing at your promises. Carl Jung would say this. Of course it does. Because the habit was never the real problem. It was the mask. When you rely on willpower alone, you're fighting smoke instead of fire. You're grabbing at branches while the roots grow deeper. Think of someone who stops drinking but suddenly gains weight from overeating. Or someone who deletes Instagram but spends hours lost in YouTube instead. The habit changed costumes, but the actors stayed the same. Why? Because the real wound beneath the loneliness, the shame, the fear of failure was never addressed. Jung had a word for this hidden wound, the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's the part of you you've buried, the anger you never expressed, the fears you never admitted. The desires you've been told are wrong. You push them away, pretend they don't exist. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It leaks out. And one of its favorite escape routes, your habits. That's why scrolling your phone isn't just scrolling. It's escaping silence. Overeating isn't just overeating. It's numbing emptiness. Procrastination isn't just laziness. It's shielding yourself from the terror of not being good enough. Now here's the shocking part. Jung believed your shadow wants to be seen. That's why it hijacks your habits. Because habits are the only language your unconscious has left when you refuse to listen. So when you fight a habit with pure discipline, you're basically gagging the messenger. You're shutting down the only part of you that's trying to communicate. And that's why willpower feels like running in circles. Because the shadow will always find another way to speak. Let's imagine this. You're sitting at home after a long day. The house is quiet. Suddenly, a wave of restlessness creeps in. Your mind says, just check your phone for a second. Before you know it, 30 minutes have vanished into scrolling. Or maybe you tell yourself you'll start studying at 8 p.m., but when the clock strikes 8, you feel a strange weight in your chest. The thought of opening that book feels unbearable. So, you distract yourself, make food, clean your desk, anything but the actual task. Later, you hate yourself for it, but in the moment, the avoidance feels safe. Carl Jung would say, this is not random. These are not bad habits. They're shadows in disguise. The shadow is Jung's word for the hidden side of your personality. It's everything you've decided doesn't belong in the good version of you. Maybe as a child, you were told not to cry, so you pushed sadness away. Or maybe your anger scared people, so you buried it. Maybe your parents valued achievement, so you buried laziness and need for rest. But here's the paradox. The things you exile don't die. They wait. And when they get hungry enough, they sneak out through your habits. That late night scrolling. It's not about the screen, it's your loneliness crying for company. That overeating. It's not hunger, it's the shadow offering comfort for an ache you won't name. That procrastination. It's not laziness, it's fear of failure wearing a costume. Habits are masks. The shadow is the face beneath them. Now think about people who quit one habit only to pick up another. The smoker who stops, but starts overeating. The workaholic who slows down, but drowns in video games. The cycle doesn't break because the root wound, the buried shadow, was never faced. That's why discipline feels like fighting smoke. With a sword, you're battling the symptom, not the source. And the shadow loves this game, because the more you fight the surface, the deeper it hides. Jung didn't say this to discourage us. He said it to free us. He believed the shadow is not evil, it's misunderstood. It's simply the parts of us that are desperate to be acknowledged. When you bury anger, it becomes explosive. When you bury fear, it becomes paralyzing. When you bury desire, it becomes obsession. But when you face the shadow, when you sit with it, admit it, listen to it, the energy changes. It stops sneaking out through self-sabotage. Let me give you a story. A man worked late every night. He told himself it was ambition. But when he looked deeper, he realized he was avoiding going home to a failing marriage. Work wasn't the real. Addiction, it was a mask. The shadow beneath was fear of silence, fear of admitting love had died. The moment he faced that truth, the habit lost its grip. This is the shocking answer Jung gave. You can't break bad habits because they're not random. They're messages. They're your shadow asking to be heard. So the question becomes, if fighting them doesn't work, what does? How do we respond to habits in a way that actually frees us, instead of keeping us trapped? Carl Jung believed the unconscious doesn't speak in plain words. It speaks in symbols, dreams, slips of the tongue, patterns of behavior, and yes, habits. Your bad habit isn't just a random action, it's a living symbol. Think about that. For a second, every time you bite your nails, binge watch shows, or keep putting off work, your unconscious is talking. It's saying, something inside me needs attention. The problem is, we've never learned how to read that language. We just judge ourselves instead. When you say, I'm weak, I'm lazy, I have no control, you're not listening. You're shaming the very part of you that's asking for help. Jung would say, don't attack the habit, watch it. Here's how. The next time you feel the pull of your habit, pause. Don't fight it immediately. Instead, ask, what happened right before this urge? Did you see something online that made you feel less than others? Did a memory flash in your mind? Did someone's comment sting you? These are not coincidences. These are the triggers that awaken the shadow. And your habit, whether it's scrolling, overeating, or procrastinating, is the disguise it wears to survive. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you always procrastinate on big projects. On the surface, it looks like laziness. But if you slow down and observe, you might notice the urge hits right after you imagine failing. That's not procrastination, it's fear in costume. The shadow is whispering, if I never start, I can never fail. Or maybe you're someone who snaps at loved ones. It feels like anger out of nowhere, but watch closely. Maybe it happens right after you feel criticized or unseen. The shadow is shouting, please notice me, please respect me. But since it's buried, it leaks out as explosive anger instead. This is why Jung said habits are not enemies, they're messengers. They're coded signals from the unconscious. If you decode them, you stop being their victim. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They think understanding the shadow means excusing the habit. Oh, I procrastinate because I'm afraid, so I'll just accept it. No, Jung never said accept the sabotage, he said accept the message. Once you know what the habit is protecting you from, you can meet that need honestly. If scrolling gives you comfort, find comfort in connection with a friend, a walk, even journaling. If overeating makes you feel safe, build real safety through routines, boundaries, or self-soothing. That doesn't destroy your health. If procrastination shields you from failure, confront the fear directly. Break the task into tiny steps, so failure isn't catastrophic anymore. The key is this: replace the disguise with the truth. Give the shadow what it really needs instead of what the habit fakes. And here's the beautiful part: when you do this, the habit doesn't have to fight you anymore. It starts loosening on its own, not because you crushed it with willpower, but because it's no longer carrying the weight it once did. This is the power of awareness. When you see your habit as a symbol, not a sin, you don't just gain control, you gain understanding. You realize you were never broken. You were just speaking the wrong language. But here's the challenge. Even when we decode the message, something inside us clings to the old identity. Why? Why do we hold on to habits that hurt us, even when we know the truth? Here's the strangest part of human psychology. Sometimes we don't break our bad habits, not because we can't, but because deep down we don't want to. Now, you might be thinking, that's crazy. Why would I ever want to stay stuck? But Jung would remind us the ego, the I you think you are, loves stability, even if that stability is toxic. Let me explain. Over time, your habit stops being just something you do and starts becoming part of who you are. You don't just say, I procrastinate. You say, I'm lazy. You don't just say, I overthink. You say, I'm an overthinker. You don't just say, I drink too much. You say, that's just who I am. See the danger? A habit slowly hardens into identity, and identities are heavy. They shape how you enter a room, how you talk to people, how you see your future. And once you fuse with a label, the unconscious will do everything it can to keep the story consistent, even if it destroys you. Why? Because to the ego, consistency feels safer than freedom. If your ego believes, I'm the kind of person who always fails, you will unconsciously seek situations that confirm it. Not because you want to fail, but because it keeps the story intact. And your habits? They play the role perfectly. The procrastination, the anger, the addiction, they all become actors in a script you never stop performing. This is why so many people feel trapped. Because the habit isn't just about comfort anymore, it's about protecting the identity. Imagine someone who's always been the shy one. Deep down, their shadow might be full of thoughts, opinions, even boldness. But letting go of shyness means stepping into a world without that anchor. It's terrifying. Or think of the reckless one. Without the thrill, who are they? That's scarier than the habit itself. And here's the brutal truth. Most people would rather keep a painful identity than risk facing the unknown. But Jung's wisdom flips this completely. He said the first step to real change isn't discipline, it's disruption. Not fighting harder, but doing one small thing that doesn't fit your old role. If you've always been the quiet one, speak up once in a meeting. If you've always been the avoider, make that phone call you've been dreading. If you've always been the perfectionist, deliberately leave something imperfect. These small disruptions shake the ego just enough that it can't keep recycling the same script. They create a crack in the mask, and through that crack, the real, you can breathe. This is why willpower alone doesn't free you, but courage does. The courage to do something unfamiliar, something that breaks the identity you've been clinging to. Because when you break the script, the shadow loses its favorite stage. So, the shocking answer to why you cling to bad habits is this. They're not just behaviors. They're anchors. They anchor you to an identity you think you can't live without. But the moment you test that assumption, the story begins to unravel. Which brings us to the final step. Once you've faced the shadow, once you've disrupted the identity, what happens next? What does true freedom from habits actually feel like? So far, we've uncovered the truth Jung left behind. Your habits aren't random. They're shadows. They're masks protecting wounds. They're symbols speaking a language your conscious mind never learned. They're anchors holding you in an identity that feels familiar, even when it hurts. But what happens when you finally listen? What happens when you stop treating habits as enemies to destroy and start treating them as messengers to understand? The first change is subtle. You notice yourself pausing. That automatic scroll on your phone, it doesn't grab you as tightly. That late-night craving, it whispers, but you realize it's not hunger, it's loneliness. And for the first time, instead of shaming yourself, you get curious. Why do I feel this right now? That small shift, shame into curiosity, is the doorway Jung was pointing to. From there, something strange happens. The habit begins to loosen. Not because you fought it into submission, but because it no longer needs to carry the weight it once did. Like an old friend who overstayed their welcome, it starts leaving quietly, without a fight. And then comes the bigger shift: identity. Remember how habits can become labels? I'm lazy, I'm weak, I'm broken. When you face the shadow, those labels crack. You realize they were never who you were. They were just temporary roles your unconscious used to keep you safe. Imagine trying on an old shirt that used to fit perfectly, but now feels small, tight, and uncomfortable. That's what happens when you step back into an old habit after growth it no longer fits, not because you forced yourself to resist, but because you've simply outgrown it. That's true freedom, not the exhausting battle of self-control, but the quiet realization, I don't need this anymore. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole. And wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about giving every part of you even. The shadow a voice. When you do that, the unconscious stops hijacking your habits. The war inside ends because you're no longer fighting yourself. And here's the gift people rarely talk about. Once you understand your own habits differently, you start seeing others differently too. You stop calling someone lazy and instead see the fear they're protecting. You stop labeling someone toxic and notice the wounds they're hiding. This compassion for yourself and others is the final sign you've integrated this shadow. Now, let's be honest, this isn't overnight transformation. Jung warned that the psyche works in seasons. Not seconds. You'll fall back sometimes. You'll feel the old urges. That doesn't mean you've failed, it means you're human. The difference now is you notice faster, you understand deeper, and you return to the path sooner each time. Every return is a victory. And slowly, the habit fades into silence until one day, you're in the same room with the same trigger and you feel nothing, no craving, no shame, just clarity. That's freedom, not controlling the habit but living beyond it. So, here's the question Jung would leave you with. What indeed benefits from keeping this habit alive? If you can answer that honestly, then act on what you find. The change you've been chasing will stop being a fight. It will become a release. And that's why, once you see your habits through this lens, you'll never see them the same way again. If you felt something shift inside you today, if this opened your eyes even a little, then this journey is just beginning. Because the deeper we go into Jung's wisdom, the more you'll see that the very things you thought were holding you back might actually be the keys to your freedom. So don't stop here. Subscribe, join this journey, and let's keep uncovering the hidden psychology that can transform not just your habits, but your entire life.